Hey kids, howdy, and welcome to this week's edition of Conscious Embodiment, Astrology, and Dreams with Dr. Michael Lennox. That's me. I'm here with Zoe. Howdy, Zoe.
Hello, hello.
Coming at you for the week of July 10th through 16th, smack dab in the middle of Cancer season, in probably the last quiet week that we're going to have for a little while starting next week.
Beautiful. I had a question about this. Feelings of Cancer. It seems a lot of my friends are going through it right now in the last week or so, and I'm not seeing the end quite yet. Is that just all of Cancer season? Like everyone's just in their feels?
Well, I mean, in a way, yes, because it is the season where we first archetypally invented feelings at the personal level. And Cancer as an archetype is designed to have us understand our feeling state and protect ourselves when a little bit extra triggered. So it is the most personally emotional mansion of the zodiac because it's the first of the three water signs. So it's the first time in the archetypal evolution that the zodiac represents that we get introduced to feelings. It's kind of like we move through the fire of Aries and the groundedness of Taurus and the intellectual stimulation of Gemini, and we get to Cancer, and suddenly it's like, wow!
You're like, what are these emotions?
What are these emotions? I gotta shut the door, batten down the hatches, and just eat bonbons and protect myself. And, that full moon last week, that meant business, right? Because the sun's in Cancer, and so we were aware of our tenderness, and then Capricorn moon comes along and says, climb the mountain of your of your desires and ambitions. And that alone can set up a crisis of sensitivity and tenderness, because that Cancer is grabbing at us, keeping us feeling a little tender. So yes, that it is absolutely, and we are still in Cancer season, so it's still a more tender and emotional time. Next week is epic, kids. I mean, the 17th, which is next Monday, is the day of the new moon. It's the day that the nodes change signs. It's the day that Venus hits 28 degrees and stops moving for 11 days. Next week's big. But I'm going to devote a lot of today's podcast to talk about the nodes of the moon, because although this does happen next Monday in terms of the exact moment of it, we are actually moving through something ridiculously important and significant in the way that astrology describes cycles, and that is the nodes of the moon are getting ready to change signs. So I'm going to start with a question. I loved the fact that the nodes are changing signs. I think people out there are aware of this if they're following astrology with, various, memes and forecasts. And so I got the same question from two different people about the nodes changing signs, or I think inspired by the changing signs of the nodes. Someone named Mashan Pish.
I love that name.
But yeah, it's an Instagram handle. So someone on Instagram named Marshan Pish reached out on Instagram, and Sally sent us an email with the same question. And these are Marshan Pish's words. Hi, Dr. Lennox. Adore you. Yay. Thank you. Just wanted to submit a question to be considered for your weekly podcast. I understand that the signs for the North and South nodes have recently switched to Aries Libra. No, not quite. They haven't recently switched, but they are about to. I was curious what this means for someone who has their North node in Aries and South node in Libra, and alternatively, what this would mean for someone whose North node is in Libra and South node is in Aries, blah, 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 blah. Would this mean that their dharma karma is now on its way to being fully expressed? Can we only reach this when the North Node is in our sign? Thank you for your time. Wishing you a lovely week and an easy Venus retrograde. She writes Peace, which I think is like peace and is part of her handle. I don't know. That's a very broad question. Like the question itself might have sent some of you into, what? What's she saying? So I'm going to get to the question after I do the teaching on the nodes for you guys. And so I'm going to start sort of from the beginning. So let's start with what the nodes of the moon are in the solar system at large. So I want you all to picture something as I describe this. I want you to picture the moon's orbit as like a circle in the cosmos. It's just a circular little spin of energy, the moon zipping around the Earth. Now I want you to picture the Earth's orbit around the sun as a kind of larger circle of energy that you can picture in your mind, the Earth zipping around the sun. Now I want you to imagine them together because they are. The circular orbit of the moon sits on top of the Earth's orbit around the sun because they're all connected. And so picturing this little energy, circular energy of the moon, and the larger circle of the Earth's energy, and that they're attached to each other, where they connect, there's a vector of energy that shoots off in the front and shoots off in the back. And the front-facing energy is called the north node of the moon, and the back one is called the south node of the moon. And that's what these points are energetically. Nodes are a physics, a term that has to do with energies that shoot out as a result of the tension of movement, of bodies moving in space. When the Earth and the sun and the north node of the moon are in a kind of an alignment, we have an eclipse. It is the angle of the solar system at a certain moment of the year that creates the shadow passing and breaking, the relentless beam of light. And that's described geometrically as Earth, sun, and node of the moon in alignment. Then 6 months later, the sun will have moved 180 degrees, will be aligned with the other node, and create another eclipse. So that every 6 weeks, we have these breaking of the beam moments that are generated by these vectors of energy called the north and south node of the moon. So if you think of eclipses as being transformational and indicating fated changes in our consciousness. In the old days, they were thought to be omens and portents of the future. That's a really powerful, energetic interpretation put into eclipses. In fact, one could argue that the seasonality and eclipses in our system might be part of why life thrives on the planet. There's that whole Goldilocks sensibility that we are just where we need to be in the solar system distance-wise from the sun, that the moon and the sun are 400 times the size of each other, but also 400 times further from each other, from us, relative to each other, which is why the eclipse is so total in its capacity to black out the light. Eclipses are just this phenomenal happy accident that sort of says life and consciousness exists here. When we take our first breath, those nodes land in the natal chart as equally significant to an individual's path through life, where the south node of the moon will represent your entrance into this life, your karmic beginnings, your past life experiences. You will bring in through the south node things you're organically good at and come naturally to you, but you'll also bring in the baggage that you're supposed to fix and handle. And as you move through life, the baggage you collect will sort of be held in your south node until you're ready to drop it. Then the north node shows up in your chart as your dharmic purpose in life. You can interpret the sign and the house placement of one's north node in the natal chart to Have a conversation about what's the purpose of your life? Why did you come? What did you come here to do? And the archetypes associated with the sign and the house placement is wildly informative to how an astrological chart reflects a person's life. In fact, if I were going to do a workshop in a setting, and I've done this many times where, I'll go to a spiritual center or a yoga studio and someone will say, bring an astrology workshop. It's always the North Node, South Node workshop.
I like that.
It's a beautiful topic in astrology that can break down something as complex as like who you are, where you come from, and what's your purpose into a powerful conversation about archetypes that live inside. Now, that's what the sign and house placement really are, the archetypes of your past and the archetype of your future. There's a beautiful way of understanding the South Node and the North Node in your chart as a function of moving through life by calling them the dragon's head and the dragon's tail. So the North Node is your dragon's head. It has a head and eyes, and it can see where you want to go. But it has no capacity to get there. It just sees. Meanwhile, you have a tail that flails, behind you, that propels you forward. So you now have movement that can push you from the beginning to the end of your life, but it can't see where it's going. It just moves. So you can consider the first 40 years of a life to be a time when your dragon's head of Dharma, destiny, and life purpose, and your dragon's tail, the South Node of movement that's karmic, that pushes you through the first half of your life, as disconnected. That's being young and stupid and bumping into your karma for all your life lessons. Going, I'm moving, but who knows if I'm going where I want to go? Once we get to midlife, late 30s, early 40s, we start to knit together our dragon's tail and our dragon's head. So as we age in wisdom and do some healing and integration, we get to a point in our life where now the flapping tail of our dragon's South Node can actually help us move in the direction that we came here to fulfill. And then hopefully, if you've done the work, you spend the last part of your life, air quotes, in your North Node of Dharma. So what I'm hoping to engender in you guys listening to this is to, even if it's just in that way of I don't really know what he's talking about, but I can kind of feel intuitively what he's alluding to, that the transformative power of eclipses that we all experience at the collective level, meaning everybody's experiencing the same thing at the same time, is also related to our individual journey of how it's so profound for us to live a life where we are in deep consideration of our karmic past that led us on this journey and the dharmic purpose we feel we were born to, generate on the planet. They're related. So back to the nodes changing signs. So let's talk a little bit about the structure of the nodal cycle. The nodes will spend 18 months in the same sign. So what this means is for the 18 months in consideration, we now know in advance what sign a year and a half's worth of eclipses are going to be in. And remember, eclipses are collective experiences that on some level, we're all experiencing them in the same way at the same time.
Right.
So the signs that the nodes move into when they change signs signal an important thematic change about what moving forward in our lives is going to look and feel like at a collective level, and what we're moving away from is going to look and feel like at a collective level.
Where are we headed?
We'll also Well, the nodes move backwards in the zodiac. And so the north node that's been in Taurus for the last year and a half is going to move into Aries. So our
Whoa.
north node will move into Aries. Yes, fire, action, movement,
Yes.
embodiment,
Yes.
impulse, powerful startup energy. South node's going to move into Libra. Now remember, this is what we're moving away from, so we might be more in consideration of the sign's shadow artifacts. And with Libra, it's about passivity, wanting to keep the peace so much that you're afraid to take a risk. You know, Libra's very risk averse because it prefers this balance and harmony. Aries doesn't know from risk aversion. It doesn't even know from risk. It just says, I got to move.
Just go, go, go.
Go, go, go. And if I fall off the cliff, oh well. Because Aries is a fire sign, a cardinal sign. Cardinal means startup energy. So now, think about a year and a half ago when the North Node moved into Taurus and the South Node moved into Scorpio. We were talking a lot about moving toward love or get caught up with death. North Node in Taurus, Venus ruled. It's all about the values we hold and the loveliness of being here. You know, Taurus, like I talk a lot about how hard it is to be in a body because I think it's really fucking hard to be in a body. But Taurus is the consciousness of, oh yes, and it's also lovely. That there's beauty in the sensuality of being in a body, and there's love to be shared by groundedly bringing love into everything that drives you forward. And for the last 18 months, all of our eclipses were designed to move us into a more grounded and loving sort of posture in life. And every eclipse was helping us move away from things at a level of death, rebirth, change, and transformation. Right? If Scorpio was handling the past, that's helpful because Scorpio represents death, and there's no better way to move on to a new future than if you let the past die. So when the nodes moved into Taurus and Scorpio, we were talking a lot about move towards love or get sort of trampled by death. Now what happens is the North Node says, get moving. Push your stuff out into the world. The time for hesitating is past. And then the South Node moving into Libra says any challenges of being too risk averse, not wanting to upset the apple cart, passivity that comes from fear. All of those things will be qualities we want to move away from and let go of. From a relationship perspective, Aries Libra is the relationship trajectory of the zodiac. And so eclipses over the next year and a half and where we're going over the next year and a half might include changes in how people relate to their relationship dynamic. That's in there as well. And of course, you can look to the Aries and Libra houses in your natal chart and know that anything in the consciousness of that house and any planets that you might have in Aries or Libra will be interestingly impacted over the next year and a half. When the North Node travels over somebody's planet or point in their natal chart, the consciousness of that point or planet will align with their forward movement. The example I always give of this is that when the North Node of the moon was in Libra, Libra is my midheaven. That was the year of my first book deal, right? Where the world was saying, oh, we want to hear what Michael Lennox has to say. We'll publish a book and start that thing off. And I'm about to publish my fourth now, right? But it started when Libra was crossing my midheaven. So for anybody who's got planets or points in Aries, at some point over the next year and a half, the consciousness of that planet will be ushered forward in terms of your expression of dharmic movement. When the South Node crosses a planet or point, so now we're talking about anybody with planets or points in Libra, that dragon's tail sort of gets engaged to like swipe away the past, clear out the detritus, shift the things in the Libra portion of your chart from holding the past to dumping the past so that you can be freer to move more powerfully forward, driven by that Aries sensibility. While the nodes are not a planet, they're just a point. It is a real point, and it's a mathematically expressed point in space. And because the dynamic between the Earth and the Moon is essentially wobbling, meaning there's like a vibration, the Earth and the Moon pull on each other. It's not a machine, it's not a gear. It's a dynamic set of two objects that are pulling on each other. There's a wobble in our perspective of looking at the nodes from Earth, where here's how it would look. If you were looking at the North Node, a day or two or three, it would appear to be moving forward. And then for a day or two or three, it'll appear to be moving backwards, and then forwards, and then backwards, and then forwards, and then backwards, and forward, and then backwards. That's called the true node, where it truly is moving from our perspective, has this little wobble where every 2 to 3 days it goes back and forth from direct to retrograde motion. Not in like a sweeping movement thing, but like a little vibrating wobble. True node. Many astrologers will opt for using the mean node, where the retrograde is eradicated by creating a kind of an average sense of the movement. And I think there are astrologers who prefer that because they get confused by the shifting retrograde of the wobble. Now, I know some of you who are less advanced with astrology, you're already going, what the fuck is he talking about? I apologize. So for those who are getting this a little bit, this little teaching is for you. And if those of you who are a little earlier in the journey of astrology who are like, I don't know what he's talking about, you don't really need to. This isn't significant. Well, here's what we all need to know. Starting Monday of next week, we are in a shift of where our eclipses are going to tell us the most transformational, fated, and powerfully forward-moving energies are going to take place. So look to your Aries and Libra points and planets and houses in your chart to know what the next year and a half might bring you at an individual level, and just understand the collective is starting to move towards action, away from passivity, and at a time where goodness knows the planet needs all of us to be bringing our gifts powerfully into the world, and that's part of what happens with this shift. It is definitely a quiet week. The weekend will not feel quiet because the new moon will be brewing. Venus will be beginning to slow down. The nodes will be careening towards their shift on Monday. But in terms of the weather of this, the week ahead, there's not a whole lot to talk about. But there's a big change that happens today that we will all feel because Mars is changing signs. Today, Mars moves into Virgo. He'll stay here for about 6 weeks, just a little bit over 6 weeks. That's his usual amount of time in a sign. And Mars rules our physical body, our decision-making, our relationship to goals and ambitions, how we're stewarding anger and reactivity and impulse. Mars is essentially neutral in the sign of Virgo in terms of the dignities. In other words, he's not exalted here or in rulership. He's not in detriment or fall. These are just different, demarcations that indicate a planet's not operating well. Or operating really, really, really well. So that's why we call Mars a neutral placement in Virgo. However, Virgo's ruled by Chiron as well as Mercury. So why this is important to point out is that we carry our wounds in the body. Now, that doesn't mean that all wounds are physical, but our body is the only aspect of ourself that is present in the now moment, right? Our bodies move through time from the beginning of our lives to the end of our lives. where our mind can go into yesterday and tomorrow, and our feelings can feel like they're connected to the past and the future, even though technically they're not. So Mars ruling the physical body by virtue of moving into Virgo is automatically setting us up for 6 weeks of a greater sense of healing. It starts with the Virgo rulership of Chiron, the great healer, but it also, for my money, it's important to acknowledge that the body being in the present moment will hold wounds from the past in such a way that our physical body is carrying stuff that needs to be healed. So that's what I meant by the body is carrying our wounds, and not just physically, although wounded consciousness can show up as dis-ease and physical problems in the body, that's for sure. But I also just mean that when we're in our present day life, but we're in some pain and ache that come from family of origin patterning, it is our body that's experiencing the patterning from decades ago in the present moment. So, just by virtue of the planet of the body being in the sign that invented how the body works, because that's one of the inventions of Virgo. It's like Virgo is the consciousness that said, all right, if you want to be here and it's grounded and you can communicate and you want to be expressive and playful, I'll create the thing that will allow for all of that, which is the body. The body is the vehicle. The body is the source of everything. So for the next 6 weeks, understand that we're making our decisions in a more detailed and analytical way. That's probably a good thing for some people. Less impulse, more definitive purpose around choices can be made when Mars is in Virgo. We're more inclined to analyze our experience rather than react in anger. So that's going to be a little bit helpful. And while this is a mutable sign, which means it's fluid and flexible and suggests a kind of changeability, it is an earth sign. And so having the body, which is like an earth construct, in an earth sign that's also healing means I think it's a nice place for Mars to be, and that change starts today. This week features one of the important triple transits of Venus's retrograde cycle. Probably the one that is the most mysterious in terms of understanding in advance what it might bring us. So I'll remind you that behind us is the trine from Venus to Chiron. That hit on June 29th. That was the healing thread of this Venus retrograde cycle. So the fact that Venus is even making contact with Chiron 3 times is, part of what makes it a beautiful thing of great healing. But what Venus is doing this weekend, it peaks on Friday, is the great eliminator angle with Neptune. Now, if you've been following me for more than 30 seconds, you all know how much I love this subtle angle that's considered by most astrologers as a minor transit. And it is. It is a minor transit, but it is the transit that reflects how almost all growth and change happens in life. Sometimes we have paradigm shifts, revolutionary changes, dark nights of the soul, spiritual awakenings, big shifts that happen very suddenly in revolutionary fashion. But mostly we evolve. We have an evolutionary trajectory through growth, which means I grow a little, I heal a little, I learn a little, and I make a new choice. Then I grow a little, heal a little, learn a little more, and I make another new choice. Then I learn a little, grow a little, heal a little more, make another. You get the point. It's like a little, sewing machine knitting cleaner stitches bit by bit because we're getting rid of the crap that interfered with our ability to knit together our lives more efficiently or purposefully or beautifully. Whenever Neptune is involved in a transit and the geometry is a little edgy, the shadow of Neptune connects to cloudiness, confusion, and not seeing things clearly. We call this angle the great eliminator because it almost always implies, though I talk about it in terms of how we move forward in new ways, the reason we can is this is the angle of leaving something behind. It's the eliminator angle. So if Neptune's shadow is lack of clarity, one of the things that we're leaving behind in this Venus retrograde is things we didn't see. Things we were in denial of. Things we were pretending through fantasy were true, but really aren't true. And it's like when, I'm reminded of when Harry met Sally and Carrie Fisher's having this affair with a married man. And all through the movie, they're saying he's never going to leave his wife. And she says, you're right. I know you're right. It's like the fog lifts and you're like, he's never going to leave his wife. So you make a new choice.
Okay, we're leaving our delusions behind.
That is perfect language, Zoe. We are leaving our delusions behind. And for some of you kids, this is going to hurt. Just want to be clear that this is one transit in the midst of many transits, one of which is a healing from the trine to Chiron that's already sort of been triggered behind us. Just last week on July 2nd, Venus squared Uranus. That's where the sudden part of it can come, right? Things are going to change this summer for some of you, winter down under some of you, very fast and suddenly. And for some, it may come from something getting revealed or seeing more clearly, or might even come at you as someone saying, this is how I really feel, and here's the new lay of the land. So this can be circumstantial. It can be
spicy.
Internal. Yes, it's definitely. So, like always in a retrograde shadow, meaning she's not turned around yet, she's just given us, I like to say, the first part of every retrograde cycle is like the brochure. The brochure that says, here's what you signed up for. The brochure is describing energy that starts at the end of July, around the 23rd, when Venus goes direct and starts moving backwards. What she's doing this weekend as part of all of these triple transits is giving us a hint as to what delusions might need to be, worked through, or what denial might, be getting busted, or changes in your heart where suddenly you might have an experience over this next week into next weekend going like, wow, I'm not sure that my heart wants this anymore. Or by the other side, it could just as easily be, oh my God, I really am wanting this or that person or relationship or heartfelt desire. So pay attention, as I hope you're all doing this entire retrograde, shadow cycle, and pay particular attention over the weekend to ways in which you're starting to take the rose-colored glasses off and see your love experience in a more realistic fashion so that you can allow the changes that this retrograde cycle are capable of bringing you can do so at the deepest, richest level possible. Have at it.
Did you know that Michael has a daily astro alert? If you enjoy hearing the weekly astrology, you might like knowing more about each day. When you subscribe for the daily astro alerts, you'll get an in-depth explanation of the day's astrology sent right to your email. Subscriptions are only $10 a month, or you can purchase the yearly subscription at the reduced price of $100. To subscribe, head over to michaellennox.com. All right, it's dream segment time. Every week, Dr. Michael will interpret dreams that are sent in via email or take a live caller. If you would like your dream interpreted on the podcast, you can go ahead and email us at dreams@michaellennox.com. Hopefully your dream will make it onto the show. This week we have a dream from Bree. It's an emailed in dream and it has water, and I just thought how appropriate for Cancer season.
Well, yeah, and you were so, compelled about the what did you
Yeah,
say? You
yeah.
said this
I
before
don't
we
know. A lot of
started,
my
that
friends are
it's
going
cancer
through it
season is cry season.
emotionally right now. So cry season, baby.
Great.
Okay.
Water everywhere,
Bree
baby.
says, I had a dream that I was looking for a new home. A real estate agent was driving me around, and I asked her to drive by my childhood home from 25 years ago to see it. We did, and after seeing the home and some old neighbors' homes, we drove by a section of the woods where I spent a majority of my childhood. I used to run free, explore, daydream, ride my bike, create swimming holes, all kinds of adventures, by myself and with others. In my dream, I wanted to stop there, but the real estate agent told me that the land had been turned into an aquifer. As we drove by, I saw water covering the woods and I was sad. I thought of all my memories and how they seemed to wash away and be replaced by sterility somehow. I was genuinely sad. While I knew that the land had been empty for so long and wasn't being used by humans, the land and space held such a meaning to me. I knew the aquifer was helping in other ways necessary for that area collectively, but I felt personally very grieved. Thank you, Bree.
This, to me, there's a nugget here at the very end.
I totally agree.
Right? That's why I wanted to hear the words again. Because that, to me, is the nugget of the dream, is that though there's this grief, right, and the dream is clearly talking about what it is to let go of certain ideas of the freedom and the joys of childhood and other associations there, and I'll double back and talk about that section of the dream. But I have to start at the end, where there's clearly a benefit.
For the collective, too.
Right. So it's a broad, sweeping statement that Bree has made, that this flooding that she's personally perceiving as something to grieve is important for the collective. But remember, it's still Bree's dream. It's not a collective dream. It's Bree's dream, who's considering the value of her grief to the collective. Now, I don't know what Bree does in the world, and she's probably a lot younger than I am if her childhood home was 25 years ago, because I'd have to go back 50 years for my childhood home. But when I hear how she's ending the dream and considering her childhood and that this aquifer means help for the collective, I'm thinking about how is Bree serving the collective by sharing wisdom that she's collected by virtue of her past, the freedoms that she learned about in her childhood, the process of letting go of the past and learning how to grieve and put things in the right place. I think this dream is about Bree's personal emotional experience of contextualizing her past so that she can be a person who serves the collective with the wisdom she has. So we start on the personal level. Bree is looking for a new home, right? So the dream is saying we're in consideration of our current identity that matches our evolution to this moment, how we're operating in the world now. It's like, who am I today? And who am I today based on my life? All the way back to childhood, right? So if it's new home, it's about the future. But if it's the real estate agent is taking her into the childhood, home and going to look at specifically the childhood home, then the emotional consideration is who am I based on the family I came from and how I was raised and what my childhood experience was like. So then by driving by the woods, now we're in kind of like shadow material of Bree's consideration. Because the woods are about that which is typically hidden from clear view. And in shadow work, especially in my world of teaching, into the woods, especially from the fairy tale land of going into the woods, we go into the woods to learn about who we are at a deep, deep level, because the woods allows us the privacy of the hidden sacred spaces that lets shadow work happen.
I thought it was really interesting that like the woods held all the memories of her childhood of like wonder and exploration and
And
self
joy
and
and
joy.
exploration.
And then it's just covered in water.
Right. So if we stick with the theme of service to the collective, again, Bree's not here for us to ask these questions, but again, I'm going to make these wild projections that Bree is, in fact, trying to create a life where what she knows on the inside of her emotional wisdom could be something that she will help others by virtue of what she knows and understands. So there's a trope out there that says, go back to the things that lit you up and gave you joy as a child, and you will find your life purpose. Now, I think that's tropey as all fuck, and I wouldn't want anybody to take that on as a tool. But it is absolutely, it's a good sort of template for understanding that our job really is to find things to do that serve others, but that light us up. Because otherwise, how the hell are we going to sustain anything if it's not lighting us up? So she's, in fact, going back to the freedoms and the joys and the wonder that's pre-installed into her by virtue of her humanity that might have been easy to access as a child that she's now in some consideration of. Now, the whole, like, water and wetness and the submerging of all this doesn't feel bad to me. It doesn't feel like a destruction of the past. It feels like a natural sort of emotional containment of everything that's occurred in the past is still like with her, in her heart, in her emotions. And that as we successfully grieve the things that are from the past that have to fall away, then we can move more powerfully forward. Suddenly now I'm reminded of the nodes changing signs where we're being told, move powerfully forward and try not to be held back by the wishes you have of the past. Where Libra, balance and harmony, would be kind of like, I want access to my joyful memories, not my sadness or my emotional sort of tenderness. This section of the dream is not clean and clear. Like, there's no way to say, this is what I think it means, and have you, the listening audience, go, oh my God, he's absolutely right. Because it's a little convoluted. It's like water is also purifying. Water cleanses. Yes. Water makes all things fluid and movable. So the flooding of the woods could have something to do with now Bree being more able to touch into elements of the past that impact her emotional body today. And this dream is allowing her to have more, wisdom about what her feeling body is speaking to her as she thinks about grief of the past. We know that the dream has to do with her past because she's back in her childhood home. We know that it has to do with some sort of grief and release of the past so that she can more powerfully move forward. Now, I want to point out that water as a symbol is also about purification, of cleansing. So one thing that might be happening here is grief and sadness from Bree's childhood might be being washed away. And though it looks like, she said, replaced by sterility, could also just be about letting go of sadness of the past. So I don't think this dream is any kind of bad news. I think it's good news about moving forward in a new way. I'm looking for a new home that allows Bree to incorporate all the wisdom from the past and the grief of things let go of and a sense of emotional purification in this new sense of identity that she's cultivating, and hopefully put what she's learning about grief and life into ways that she can serve others, even if it's just in friendship, being a helpful human along the way. It's a beautiful, beautiful dream.
Thank you for listening to Conscious Embodiment, Astrology and Dreams with Dr. Michael Lennox. You can find us on Apple Music, the iHeartRadio app, and anywhere you find your favorite shows. Head on over to michaellennox.com for information on astrology readings, the Daily Astro Alert subscription, upcoming classes, and to join the mailing list.